Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the real First World War. And no, I'm not talking about 1914. This was a conflict that literally spanned the entire globe, from the forests of America to the plains of India, and it completely redrew the map of the world.
So let me ask you, when I say World War, what's the first year that pops into your head? I bet for most of you it's 1914, maybe 1939. You picture trenches, battleships, all that. But what if I told you the first truly global war kicked off way, way earlier than that? Yeah, the answer might surprise you. You got to rewind the clock more than a century and a half before World War I, back to the mid-1700s. We're talking about a conflict called the 7 Years' War. And this, you could absolutely argue, was the first time war was fought on a truly global scale. So how in the world did a war this massive even get started? Well, it wasn't just one single event. It was more like a global powder keg of old grudges, new ambitions, and a totally unexpected, dramatic shift in European politics. See, there was a peace treaty signed in 1748, but let's be honest, it was really just a timeout. Nobody was happy. Austria was still fuming that Prussia had just walked away with its rich province of Silesia, and halfway across the world, Britain and France were locked in this intense rivalry for colonial power. Everybody was basically just reloading for round two. And then, just to make things more complicated, the whole system of who was friends with whom in Europe got completely flipped on its head. This wasn't just a small shuffle, it was a political earthquake they call the diplomatic revolution, and it basically set the stage for everything that was about to happen. For decades, the teams were pretty clear. You had France and Prussia on one side, and their rivals, Britain and Austria, on the other. But Austria, feeling a little betrayed by Britain, did the unthinkable. It teamed up with its archenemy, France. This forced Britain to partner up with Prussia, totally redrawing the map and creating this tinderbox of new rivalries. And look, this wasn't just some squabble happening over in Europe. Oh no, this tension was spilling out all across the globe. In India, you had the British and French trading companies, which had their own armies, by the way, battling for control. And in North America, British colonists were pushing west, right into land that France said was theirs. It was a collision course. So you've got all these tensions simmering around the world. Where does the first shot finally get fired? You might think it would be in some fancy European capital, right? Nope. It happened deep in the American wilderness, thanks to a young colonial officer you've definitely heard of. That's right, the man himself. In 1754, a full 2 years before war was officially declared in Europe, a 21-year-old George Washington ambushed a small French patrol in the Ohio Valley. That little skirmish lit the fuse on what Americans called the French and Indian War, and it turned out to be the spark that would ignite a global fire. And from there, things just spiraled out of control, fast. What started as a small colonial fight quickly turned into this weird, undeclared war at sea. Britain just started grabbing French ships wherever they could find them, all while the two countries were still technically at peace. The final straw came when France invaded a British-held island, and that was it. War was officially on. Meanwhile, back in Europe, Prussia's King Frederick the Great is looking around and he does not like what he sees. He's surrounded by this new alliance of France, Austria, and Russia. So he figures, hey, the best defense is a good offense, and he launches a surprise attack on neutral Saxony. He was hoping for a quick, decisive win. It did not work out that way. Yeah, that gamble, it backfired, big time. By the end of 1757, things looked absolutely disastrous. The French were marching in from the west, the Russians were pouring in from the east, the Austrians were pushing from the south. I mean, you get the picture. Prussia, Britain's one and only major ally, was on the ropes and about to go down for the count. But then, just when it looked like it was all over, the tide turns. And I mean, it turns dramatically. A change in leadership back in London brings a brilliant new strategy, and it leads to an absolutely unbelievable string of victories for Great Britain. The new strategy, cooked up by a guy named William Pitt, was pure genius in its simplicity. It was a two-punch combo. First, just throw money at Prussia. Keep Frederick the Great in the fight and make sure the massive French army stays bogged down in Europe. Second, and this is the key part, use Britain's powerful navy to go pick off France's rich but vulnerable colonies all around the globe.
This new strategy paid off so well that the year 1759 became known in Britain as the Annus Mirabilis, the miracle year. And you can see why. They crushed the French navy, ending any real threat of an invasion of Britain. And on the other side of the planet, they captured the city of Quebec, which was pretty much game over for France's empire in North America.
So how did this whole massive conflict finally wrap up? Well, the end of the war didn't just stop the fighting. It created a completely new global reality, and it set off shockwaves that, honestly, we can still feel today.
So just as Prussia is about to be wiped off the map, something absolutely unbelievable happens. A total stroke of luck. The Empress of Russia, who hated Prussia, dies. And get this, her replacement is a massive fanboy of Frederick the Great. He immediately pulls Russia out of the war and even offers Frederick his troops. This event, the miracle of the House of Brandenburg, saved Prussia from total destruction.
The final peace treaty really just cemented what everyone already knew. Britain had won. France was effectively booted out of North America, handing over Canada and everything east of the Mississippi to Britain. But here's a little detail that tells you everything about what they valued back then. France fought tooth and nail to keep its tiny sugar islands in the Caribbean. Why? Because at the time, those little islands were considered more valuable than all of Canada. Wild, right? So the takeaway here is pretty clear. When all the dust settled, Great Britain stood alone as the world's dominant colonial power. This was the birth of the first British Empire, a global superpower that would dominate the world stage for the next century and a half. But winning the world is not cheap. Not at all. Britain's national debt ballooned to £133 million. For the time, that was a truly staggering, almost unimaginable amount of money. And figuring out how to pay that off, well, that would have some pretty dramatic consequences of its own. And here is the ultimate irony of this whole story. To pay down that massive war debt, who does Britain turn to? The American colonists, the very people they had just spent a fortune protecting. So Parliament starts slapping all these new taxes on the colonies, but the colonists have zero say in any of it. No voice, no representation. And that right there is the spark that would lead directly to the American Revolutionary War. So think about that. By winning a global war and building this massive empire, Britain accidentally sowed the seeds of that empire's first major crack. The victory in the 7 Years' War led directly to the taxes that sparked the American Revolution. An empire won, and then an empire fractured, all starting with a single shot in the woods of Pennsylvania. Thanks for watching.